Let's start with the basics on let's not get the violations at all from this. And this is something that I've been working with managers over the last couple of months on setting your drivers up for success on roadside inspections. And I call it the mock DOT inspection, where, I actually train managers to, get the driver in the cab of the truck, put them in the driver's seat, have them put their seatbelt on, shut the door, pull the door open, and you act like a DOT officer and work with the drivers on doing the things that they need to do correctly so they don't get the violation in the first place. So when I do this process, I, first thing I go to the driver is show me how to unmount the ELD. If they don't know how to unmount the ELD, there's your first violation for the roadside inspection there. Then show me how to transfer the logs. Actually log into the ELD, get to the transfer instructions, and show me how to do that. Show me the tractor binder. Show me where the paperwork is. Show me where the ELD manual is. Show me where the blank logbook is. Show me on the different, where's the cab card registration? Where's the annual inspection? Do you have your license? Do you have your medical card? Do you have all of this? And then go from that to stepping out of the tractor and going through the pre-trip process and reviewing the truck. One of the most frequent violations that we get on the side of the road, and I know this sounds crazy, is a violation for the fire extinguisher. So DOT officers write that because the fire extinguisher is not secure, or there's a bunch of junk over it because it's in the bunk, or the little handle, the little strap around it is not buckled down. It's those little things of teaching the drivers the right behaviors on the side of the road that's going to not get those violations. A couple of other things that I see is talking to your drivers about the right attitude on the side of the road. So I had a driver where I pulled the Vetter video on, and he starts off with this South Carolina Highway Patrol officer with a very poor attitude by saying, what the heck did you pull me over for? And it turned out to be a 3.5 hour stop. That officer took that truck apart on the side of the road, and teaching your drivers having the right attitude is going to go a long way to avoid, additional violations and things like that. So think about that as you're training your drivers to go through this process and get them comfortable with roadside inspections and those type of things. Little things like in the ELD, if they're transferring the logs, there's a web code or an email address. Explain that to your drivers, what the difference between those two things, because they have to make that choice in the ELD to transfer the logs. So all of these little tips will help avoid violations on there. This is the biggest myth about the DataQ process. So the DataQ process is all about getting accurate data into the FMCSA data source. That's what the entire process is. So I get into a lot of discussions with AOs and BCs and even drivers that said, well, I did a pre-trip inspection before I left the terminal and everything was great. And then I get to the roadside inspection and the officer finds a defect, and now I've got this violation on here. So you have to understand that the officer is doing the inspection, and whatever defect they find at the time of the inspection is what they're going to write. It doesn't matter if the driver has a clean DVIR before that. That's the key thing that you got to understand is that it's based on what the officer finds during the inspection on that. I get this a lot where a driver receives an additional violation because they don't have a DVIR, or they make a decision that they have a defect that they're out on the road. Let's say they're a set of team drivers and it's on a Tuesday and they discover, oh, we have a defect, but we're going to wait until we get back to the terminal on Saturday to fix whatever that defect is. The driver thinks everything's cool. I got my DVIR done. I've identified the defect. I talked to my manager or my maintenance person. We're going to fix it on Saturday when we get back. Where the driver gets in trouble is they identify that defect on Tuesday and put it on the DVIR, but they don't put that defect on the DVIR for Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So the driver can receive violations for that just because they don't have the DVIR documented correctly for the whole week. Now, with all that said, even though the driver identified a defect, hey, I talked to the boss man or I talked to my maintenance guy and we're going to fix it on Saturday, the officer still can write the violation for the defect. The reason that you're doing the DVIR is, let's say your driver is out that whole week, Tuesday through Saturday, and they get written for the defect on Wednesday. Having the DVIR documented correctly is going to eliminate a further violation because the DOT should not penalize you more than once for a defect. So going with my example here, it's Tuesday, we identify a defect, we put it on the DVIR. Wednesday, the driver gets stopped by the DOT, they discover the defect, they write the violation for the defect. Thursday, the driver gets stopped again, the officer sees the defect again. The driver shows the roadside inspection from Wednesday. Hey, I've already been written on that, and therefore you can't write me on it again. So if the officer did do that, then you would be able to remove that because it's inaccurate data on the inspection. So that helps you with the process of the importance of documenting on the DVIR and making sure that you're following those procedures as you're going through your week and making these business decisions on that. It also makes the business decision that, well, maybe I don't want to wait until Saturday to get that fixed. I want to get it fixed now. So I don't get the violation. So understanding that even though you recognize the defect, you're going to get it fixed later, you can still get written for that. This is a big thing that I teach for our drivers and managers and things like that is when your driver gets pulled over for a roadside inspection, number one, they should let you know about it. And so you understand that. You want to pull the vetter video of the stop. You want to see what the attitude of the driver is, and you want to see what the attitude of the officer is on what's going on. What's the exchange on the side of the road that is going on between these two humans to understand, oh, it went from I check all your paperwork, I talk to the driver, I check their hours of service, driver, you're good to go, versus a bad exchange. And then it turns out, like my example, they take the truck apart and you've got a full page of violations and you're dealing with that. So get the better video to understand that. And then the other key thing is you want to train your drivers to politely ask the DOT officer, Hey, I understand you found a defect on a trailer tire. Do you mind if I get out? Because you're asking permission, because a lot of officers say you can't get out of the truck, but ask permission. Do you mind if I get out and take a picture of the defect of what you're seeing so I see it so I can send it to my boss? Being in a very, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am manners and asking that when you get to the point of doing the data queue, you have additional information to submit to say that what the officer found was inaccurate. And because I have this video exchange and plus I have photos, then I have something to use in the data queue to win it and get it overturned. So this is a tool here, and this tool, I keep it on my iPad. It's the North American Standard Out of Service Criteria. It's $50. No, you don't need to buy it for every driver. But I think it's a good tool to have in, AO or a BC to have this available. I get this question a lot, especially with the trailer equipment where something doesn't look right and someone makes a phone call to me or my staff and they go, is this an out of service violation? This book has all the criteria of what is an out of service violation for different things. It's got a whole section on brakes, a whole section on tires, whole section on load securement, a whole section on trailers. It covers everything to where it's a great guide. You can get the physical copy of it and have it in the office, or like I have it on my iPad. I like it on my iPad because you can use the search function to find quickly what you're looking for. It's essentially just an app and a PDF inside the app, but with that search function, it makes it a lot easier for you to understand what's going on with your equipment. So when you get your roadside inspections and you see the violation codes on there, you can use this guide to start the process of going through, okay, why did the officer give me that violation, number one? And then two, why was it an out of service violation? And it's going to give you some great information for you to manage your trucking operation a lot better on looking at this information. The other great thing in the guide is it has a ton of photographs of sample violations. So you can see a wheel hub that's showing leaking, which is a common violation. It'll show you what it looks like, or a brake out of adjustment, or different parts of the truck that can not only show you what's going on, but it also will give you better ideas on what to train for. I have a whole nother webinar on doing vehicle maintenance programs. This is a key part of that maintenance program is you've got to understand what causes these things. The other thing that's inside of this guide is the actual procedures for the different levels of roadside inspection. So a level one, it has it right in the middle of the guide that this is what is going to happen during that inspection. This is what is going to be expected. And going back to that mock DOT training that I told you about a minute ago, it'll give you and your managers a lot more information of what I need to cover. We spend so much time, going through, okay, this is the way we do a proper pre-trip inspection and a post-trip inspection and all that, where I want you to do the mind shift on this is I need to teach the driver how to survive the roadside inspection. So, okay, driver, we're looking at tires. This is what they're going to look at during a roadside inspection for tires. versus teaching that you need to check the tires on the pre-trip inspection. So changing that mindset with your managers and your drivers is going to change the outcomes of your roadside inspections, and it should absolutely lower the number of violations you get. Now, how does this affect you as a line haul contractor? I have this conversation with a lot of managers that they don't realize the point value for roadside violations. And you can find this information in My Ground Biz, and it's a big aha moment for a lot of my managers that an unsafe driving or a vehicle maintenance roadside violation is essentially the same points as a preventable accident. If you see that okay, I got a vehicle maintenance violation, then boom, I've got 45 points on there. And a lot of the confusion is there are CSA points on violations that you can see in the DOT, and we'll look at a little bit of that in a few minutes, but it's not the same. You could have a CSA points of 7, but you are being charged 45 points for this. And I've seen contractors that have tanked their safety score. They're not having accidents. They're not having door pull incidents. They're not having trailer disconnects. What they're having is a bunch of roadside inspections with roadside violations, and they go from a high safety tier to a low safety tier just because of the roadside violations, and that's problematic. Then you see on the driver fitness. Driver fitness is about the driver's license, whether it's valid or not, and think about things where drivers get in trouble with that. You know, if they have child support obligations and they don't pay their child support, well, their license can get suspended. You know, First Advantage or you may not know that, and then they get stopped on a roadside, and lo and behold, their license is expired. Or they, on their medical card, they moved recently from one state to another, but they didn't go to the DMV and certify their medical card to the DMV, and their license, their medical card is not valid, and therefore their license gets downgraded. Well, when those things happen under the driver fitness, you're looking at 34 points on that. Then if you look at your hours of service violations that, are in there, your driver didn't certify their logs, they didn't do the form and manner right, they didn't do accept a unidentified driving event, something like that, then you're looking at 34 points on that. Then on the drug and alcohol, your driver, this is a common thing you may not know about. Your driver applies for another job. You don't know about it. They've been working for you. They apply for another job and they decide, man, I'm not going to go with that job. I'm going to stay here with my contractor. But that other job scheduled them for a pre-hire drug test. That driver is a no-show on that pre-hire drug test, and they're prohibited in the FMCSA clearinghouse. They get stopped on roadside, and lo and behold, your driver's placed out of service because they're prohibited because they did a simple thing of trying to apply for another job and didn't show up for a scheduled drug test. So understanding that these are some weird things that happen behind the scenes that literally are out of your control, but it does play in on the roadside inspection. Then there's the non-CSA violations that could be, state and local stuff that are going on. And I'll show you that on the sample inspection that I have here where it says it's not included in the SMS calculation. You're looking at 12 points on that. And then a clean inspection with no violations, you're getting a credit of 7 of those. There's a lot of different things that you can do. Drivers can ask for an inspection if they think if everything's good and try to obtain a clean inspection. Back in the day, we used to be able to bring DOT officers over to the truck lot and, inspect 12 trucks at a time and go through them and get a bunch of clean inspections. That's not as common now. It still can happen, but those are some strategies to think about, getting a relationship with your local DOT office and seeing if they're willing to do something like that. So if a contractor has a couple of bad roadside inspections with violations and all that, and you want to get some clean inspections, you can see about doing that. Some people go through state trucking associations to develop that relationship, going through the local DOT office to, try to do that. It used to be back in the day where the DOT office has new DOT officers, and they used to love doing this to say, oh, I'm going to bring my new officer over and train them how to do these inspections. And it was a great way of doing it. A lot of stuff changed after COVID, and that it's not the same, but I do still see it with contractors. Have seen several contractors that are our customers that they get that process in place, get that relationship with the local DOT office, get them to come over and do these inspections and get that credit to help with their SRS report. So understanding this, that these points can add up on you very quickly on your safety results summary, your SRS report, and can tank your safety score just as much as having a bunch of accidents. All right, here is a sample roadside inspection that was in our network from last year. And I just wanted to go through a little bit of what I look at an inspection. And I want to start with this. You have to train your drivers to report these things to you, like I said, when the stop happens. Driver calls, hey boss, I've been pulled over for a roadside inspection. I'll let you know what's going to happen. Okay, cool. They get this inspection notice here, this roadside inspection, and there could be more than one document. It could be this is a roadside inspection, and then they could get a citation, the actual ticket for paying fines for the roadside stop. So this is what you're looking for first, and that's I'm telling you this so you can ask the questions of your driver. Driver, you were stopped. I need the roadside examination report. Did you get a ticket? Yes, boss, I got a ticket. And send me both of those ASAP and send them in. So a couple of things here is there's a little trick about the report number. So on this report, and this is why I chose this report, I had to really hunt for this report. The last digits on the report number will tell you how many inspections that officer has done in their career here. So on this inspection, I know the officer has done 392 inspections. The first 32 inspections of that officer are done with his supervisor. So that's the training phase of the DOT officer on this. So this officer only has 392 inspections. Now, you may see on an inspection report that it says 6,000 inspections. When you see a report like that, what that's telling you is that inspection station, that weigh station or whatever, they're using one laptop. So they could have 10 inspectors at that weigh station. They're all using the one laptop that has the inspection that generates these report numbers. But I wanted you to see this one here when I am showing you right here that that's something to look at just as education purposes that, okay, this officer is fairly new and you can see he wrote a bunch of violations here and, I might need to look at this really closely to see what I can do to do this DataQ challenge. So one of my little tips and tricks there. All right. Then you want to verify unit one is always the tractor, and then it's units two and three is the lead trailer and the pup trailer. Unit two is the lead trailer. Unit three is the pup trailer. They could have the dolly in here. That could be unit four. So you want to make sure that you have your truck number. Yep, that's my truck number. Yep, that's my VIN number. Yep, that was the trailer. That's the VIN number of the trailer and all that. You just want to verify that, because if that is inaccurate, that is a wrong equipment ID or something like that, there's a first part of your challenge to correct the information that may help you on this. Then this is what I'm talking about, is these violations right here are state specific violations for this particular stop. When I show you on the DOT website, you're going to see that it states that it's not included in the SMS calculations, and that's where that 12 points I was talking about on the non-CSA violations that you could get caught on here. Then you got the federal violations here, which are these, and then you can see a lot of officers, what they do is this stuff is when they put this violation number in, it preloads this, and then they do this explanation right here. Trailer ABS malfunction indicator illuminated when brakes are applied. You know, they can add these notes in here. Those notes are giving you clues about what was going on with the officer at the time of the inspection. And that may be incorrect. It may be, something that can help you with handling the DataQ process. So going through the inspection report, making sure it gets to you timely. I get this a lot from drivers where they don't want to report it to you. If I tell the boss about this, I'm going to get fired. They don't tell you. The way this works inside of the Linehaul network is when this report number gets reported to the Linehaul DOT number, it goes into their FMCSA portal in near real time. So when that report goes in, let's say this report is written today and the officer uploads it tomorrow, it's going to hit the FMCSA portal for Linehaul within the next day or so. Your driver didn't tell you about it. Your Linehaul manager is going to call you and go, hey, your driver got this roadside inspection, and I need to know what's going on here. So when you're training with your drivers and you're talking to your drivers, you want to have the conversation with them to say, I want to let you know you don't need to hide these from me, because once that inspection report is uploaded into the FMCSA portal, Linehaul is going to know about it. Then they're going to call me, and then I'm going to call you, and we got a credibility problem at this point. So you need to report these to me in real time so I can get ahead of this. And I have that discussion with drivers also, is I can't help you if I don't know what's going on. So you hiding this stuff from me is just making the situation worse. And you almost need to take the attitude that if you're hiding roadside inspections from me, what else are you hiding from me? Do I even need to keep you on board because you're pulling this? The other thing the driver needs to know, and that you need to have a conversation with them, is this information right here. These violations show up on the driver's pre-employment screening report as violations for them also. It affects the driver just like it affects the Linehaul DOT number. So having that conversation that says, all right, I need you to do the right things. I need you to know how to do a roadside stop, doing all that stuff. I need you to do your pre-trip inspection. I need you to inspect your equipment every time you stop. I need you to do a post-trip inspection because it's affecting you, driver. And you need to understand that these violations are ending up on your record that are going to be there 3 to 5 years for you, whether you stay here or go somewhere else. And more motor carriers are pulling PSP reports that have this information that is going to bar a driver from getting a job. It's one thing to say that there was a overweight ticket or something like that. If I pulled a PSP report on a driver and go, okay, that's the motor carrier, that's not really the driver. But then I start seeing air brakes and different things like mud flaps and stuff like that that the driver clearly could have seen during a pre-trip inspection. And I pull a PSP report and I see 5 pages of violations. I'm not hiring that driver. There's no reason for me to bring him on because I can see from his PSP report, you don't know how to do a pre-trip inspection or you don't care to do a pre-trip inspection. So this is how all this is related and is connected for you to have these discussions with your drivers on this stuff. The last thing, and it's not on this report, it's a little weird, is there's usually a statement over here and a line for you to return the roadside inspection within 15 days. And what would happen is on most inspections, that is right in here somewhere. And you sign it, you date it, and then you send it back to whoever wrote the violation within 15 days. That's another reason to talk to the driver. Don't hide this from me. Get this to me. I have a requirement from the FMCSA that I've got to do all this stuff and sign off on this and get it back to the DOT. Generally, what they're looking for is a statement that you have fixed the defect and everything is good and you send it back. But there are issues behind the scenes if we ever had a compliance review that if you don't follow that process, then it can be problematic. So that's the inspection. Now let's get into going through all this stuff. The first website is the CSA SMS portal. If you were a motor carrier with your own DOT, you would log in right here, but we're not doing that. We're contractors and we don't have that. So you're going to scroll down halfway down the page right here, and you're going to put in the FedEx DOT number. If the internet will work. Well, let me pull up this page. This is inside. So I had already, this is what it looks like inside the portal. And we're looking at the vehicle maintenance portion, which you'd click on this blue box here. You would go down to the inspections. I already got to the inspection. So that roadside inspection that I showed you was on February 22nd, 2025. Here's the inspection number. This is what you want to do. So this tells you what the CSA points were. Remember, I said that it would show you what the CSA points are on your SRS report, but that's not necessarily what you're being penalized on that. Then you can actually click on this box, and this is the information that the officer inputted into the system. There's the tractor. Those are the two trailers, and there's their plate numbers. There's the VIN numbers, looking at all this stuff. And then here are the violations. So here is the state violations here. And then this is what I was talking about. Not used in the SMS calculations. That's the non-CSA violation you'll get. And then here are the federal violations here. So I'm going to pick on this violation here. So you have your roadside inspection. Then you're going to this website, you're searching through. I'm going to say one thing about this before I get too far in this. There is a 30-day lag for you to see this information in the public view. So if your inspection happened today, you can't get to this information until about 30 to 35 days after the inspection to get to this portion here. That means you can't do the DataQ until you see it live in this system. So I want you to know there is a delay. This is not instant. You don't have the same access as Linehaul has to do this. All right. Once you figure out what the violations are, I told you about this CVSA out of service book. You can look at the book, see what it says on that. Then you're going to go to the Federal Register. Some of you may know there are books out there, the Green Book of Regulations out there and things like this. This is where you want to go to is ecfr.gov. This is the live view of all the federal regulations in the United States. This is what you go to because it's updated all the time. And so you're going to come to this website. You know that we're going to look at 393.83. Transportation is here. Title 49, all the way here at the bottom. Then we're going to go to Chapter 3. I know this is a lot. And then we're going to go to Subchapter B. And then we're going to go to 393. Told you it was a lot. And then we're going to go to 83. Right here. So when you're doing a DataQ, what you're doing is you're looking at the regulation to see if the officer made a mistake interpreting the regulation on this. So the violation on the actual inspection was 393.83H. The exhaust system must be securely fastened to the vehicle. That is the actual regulation live in the Federal Register on what this is. Okay, so let's think about that. Where got the driver to have a nice conversation with the officer. He gets out, he takes a picture of the exhaust. The officer is showing the driver what the defect is, and the driver is taking a video or a photo or whatever of the defect to see this. And you may get all that information and go, I disagree with this. You know, I think that we have a good chance to do the DataQ on this. That's what you're looking for. That's the mindset I want you to do on this. Now, for vehicle maintenance violations, it's fairly cut and dry. Either the equipment was good or it wasn't good. So I'm giving you sort of a bad example because I had this one. Where it's really beneficial is under hours of service. If your driver gets an hours of service violation, then you can look at what the violation is. And let's say they interpreted sleeper berth wrong. And I've won a lot of different DataQ challenges just because the officer doesn't have an understanding of the correct regulation on sleeper berth. I had one in South Florida that I read the regulation here in ECFR. I read it for 30 minutes and going, I know this is wrong. Inside the regulation was the word or, and the issue that was going on with the violation is the officer said that it was a violation that the driver could not recap their hours. I knew the driver could recap their hours. That's allowed under the regulations. But I had to read the regulation for about 30 minutes for the word or to pop out to me and go, oh, it's or they can work 70 hours or recap their hours and do that. That was the secret for me to win the, excuse me. That was the secret for me to win the challenge was that word or and getting it back to the officer. When I sent it back in through the DataQ process, he approved it in like a day. And it was just one of those weird things. But you have to look at the regulation is what I'm teaching you is that's the key that you're looking at is was the officer's interpretation of the regulation different than your interpretation of the regulation for you to make the argument to correct the data to make it accurate. That's the secret to all of this. So we're getting there. You've got your roadside inspection form. You've gone to the CSA website. You found your violation in there. You printed it off. You got your information there. You know how many CSA points. You know it's live in this system right here. Let me say this real quick. There are numerous occasions where your driver gets a roadside inspection, you got the report, but it never ends up here in the FMCSA portal. I use that to get it removed off my SRS report because what I say is to the Linehaul manager, FedEx was not negatively impacted because the officer did not input the inspection against your DOT number. Therefore, you should not negatively impact me because and put it on my SRS report because of this. That's why you're checking this system. You're checking this system to make sure that it even got reported to FedEx. And if you find out it was not reported, then that's where your spidey senses should go off and say, all right, I'm writing a dispute letter on this and I want it removed off my SRS report because it didn't hit the FMCSA and it didn't affect FedEx on this, and therefore you want it removed on there. All right. Then you go to the DataQ website right here. And this is where everything starts. You, as a contractor, do not have access to the FMCSA portal. You cannot register as a motor carrier. Even though you're acting like a motor carrier, you can't register as a motor carrier. Your driver can do a DataQ, and you can do it under the public industry section here on this. A motor carrier can lock this down and say, I don't want anybody to do this except, someone in Linehaul headquarters, but they have not done that. I do hear from contractors that they talk to their terminal manager and the terminal manager goes, you can't do a DataQ. That's one conversation. I have other terminal managers that say, I can't take it off. I can't take that violation off your SRS report unless you do a DataQ. So it's two conflicting things going on there. Currently, right now, because it's not locked down, it's the contractor can set up a DataQ account and they can do the DataQ process. So you're going to go here to the public industry and set up a DataQ account. The FMCSA has adopted a login.gov protocol. That's to get into any government website, you've got to have that protocol. It's a two-step verification. So once you set up your account, it's going to open up another window and it's going to tell you to set up a login.gov profile. The main thing I want you to know about that is, let's say your BC sets up the account and they have the login because it's a two-factor authentication to get in, and that BC leaves you, you've lost access to that account. So think about that when you're setting up an account, that you understand that this is, who's got access to this, and who am I going to be able to get in and do this. Then everything you need to know is in these fact sheets. And you can download these right here and you can go through them and it's going to show you, all right, you're public industry, you're doing it on this. This is what you can do. And it'll give you information on how to do all this. I could go through each of these steps, but let me just give you the tips and tricks on this. Before you even start with the DataQ process, you've got to ask yourself, what do I have information-wise that is going to dispute what the officer discovered on the side of the road? If you don't have any information, you just can't do the DataQ because you're ticked off that you got the violation. It doesn't work that way. So you really have got to get to the mindset of, what information do I have? So I had one where we did a DataQ a couple of days ago where the officer said that there was fluid leaking from the wheel hub and it was dried on there. We had to have it fixed on the side of the road, and the mechanic got there and said, there is no leak from this wheel hub, and said it. So we had new information. Officer said there was fluid leaking from the wheel hub. Our mechanic came out, said that's false, did all this, took some pictures, wrote up the invoice and all that. We had that to submit back into the DataQ portal to say the condition that the officer saw at the time of the stop is incorrect. That's the keyword I want you to keep thinking about. And then here it is with the new information for the officer. You're basically looking for the officer to have an out on this, to go, okay, I messed up and I need to fix that. So that's really what you need to know about getting this information in here. Then this guide here, again, you can download it here, tells you how to register. This is that login.gov I'm talking about that you want to make sure that you have access to and you don't give it to an employee that leaves. And it just shows you step by step how to go through and create all this stuff. And then it gets into doing this stuff with steps for finding this stuff. The key to this is the first step, and this is what throws a lot of people off, is you have to have that number right there because it's asking you to do a search for that number to do the DataQ. It gives you a choice inside of your account on, all right, what are we doing? I'm challenging the information on a recent roadside inspection. And that very next question is going to ask you is, what inspection report number is it? You put this inspection report number in it, it does a search, and then it finds it. And then you'll hit next, and then you can start the process. In that process is, what information do you have to dispute this? So let's say it's an hours of service violation and you've got a copy of the log and you take a copy of the log, you download it as a PDF out of your electronic logging device, and you go through it and go, oh, I'm going to circle this, on the PDF and say, here's where the problem was. This is where the officer made a mistake on this, because they don't actually see what you see. They're getting everything transferred over on the transfer of the logs, but you may see something that goes, oh, that's incorrect. So having that PDF to upload with your narrative. The key thing on the narrative, and I've seen this mistake happen with a lot of different people, is you want to keep it very professional. You don't want to be judgmental. You don't want to have a nasty tone. You don't want to write in there, your officer was a jack butt on the side of the road. You don't want to do anything like that. Because when you submit the data queue, it's going to go to an adjudicator that is going to call the officer that actually wrote the violation. And that's what's going to happen. So that adjudicator is going to contact the officer and talk to them and say, hey, this person said that you were a jackbutt on the side of the road, and yada, yada, yada. It's not going to go well for you on that. So you just want to stick to the facts. You want to say, based on my review of the regulations and the documents that I am uploading to the system, we feel that this violation should be removed. That's all you're doing. That is the whole workflow on this. So what I tell people is the system times out. So you want to sort of get your ducks in a row before you get into the system. Okay, I've got my vetter video. I've got a key part of that vetter video. You're not going to upload, an hour's worth of vetter video, but let's say there's a key part of that vetter video that you think is going to help your case. Okay, I've got my mechanics invoice who went out to um, the inspection station, fixed the wheel hub leak. Oh, there was no leak. I have that to do that. Then I'm going to write up my non-judgmental narrative on what the reason I think that this, based on the regulations, should be removed. Evidence, evidence, evidence to go against the officer. Keep in mind, and I said this a few minutes ago, keep in mind, you want to give the officer an out. You want them to approve your data queue. That's the whole thing on this. So if you're saying, well, the officer was just wrong on this, you're not giving the officer out. I think that from my interpretation of the regulation that it interprets this way, that's giving the officer an out on doing this. So think about that as you're doing these type of things. Get all your stuff together before you get into the account to do all this stuff. There's plenty of AI programs to help you write it. That's today. You can put in, don't trust what the output is, but you can start there to say, okay, here's the violation I got, AI program, what do you think? Then go to the ECFR and look at the regulation. Maybe upload that. What do you think based on this? To give you some information to look at this stuff, to do this stuff. I've been doing this 37 years and I learn something new every day by following this process. I just don't go from the roadside inspection and go, okay, I'm going to do the data queue. I'm really looking at the CSA stuff. I'm really looking at the ECFR. I'm really looking at the CVSA guide and trying to put all the pieces of the puzzle to go, how am I going to give this officer an out to give me a win today so I can go get this off my SRS report? That's the key. I know that was a lot on the data queue. That's only part one. But wait, there's more. So if we go back to here, under the crash indicator, and this is a lot of what's going on. So under the DOT number in the last 24 months, we have 2,645 crashes that were deemed preventable. We have one that was deemed not preventable. So I want you to think about your SRS report. This is only going to work for a DOT recordable crash. Fatality, injury from the scene, or towed from the scene. Those three criteria right there. If you have one of those situations and you think that your driver is not at fault and it was a non-preventable crash, okay, that's the first thing that you've got to think about. Then you can go back to the DataQ process, log in, and there is a place to dispute this with inside of the DataQ system. And that is this right here, is this program. This is not easy. That is why 2,645 crashes with one change to non-preventable. Okay, the first problem is we don't have many contractors doing this. The second is it is labor intensive and there is a lot to go in this. But if you think about crashes, accidents on your SRS report, you as a manager, what do you want? I want that off my SRS report. So Linehaul Safety says it is a preventable accident and it's a DOT reportable accident. And you go, okay, you can go here and you can dispute the preventability. And if you win, then you can go back to Linehaul with a letter and say, the United States government has determined that this is a non-preventable accident and I want this off my SRS report. That's why you want to consider doing this, but it's a lot. Rule number one on this is you've got to follow the regulations. You cannot do this process if your driver screwed up. So let's say you get the Vetter video and the driver's not wearing their seatbelt, and you're barred. Your driver was speeding at the time of the accident, you're barred. Your driver did lane swerving. You know, something in the video shows that the driver did something wrong that is going to cause you to not win this. It's a DOT recordable accident with injury or fatality, and you didn't have the driver go do a post-accident crash, drug and alcohol testing. You're barred. You're not going to be able to do this. So the first thing I want you to think about is when this stuff happens, you've got to make sure that this stuff is done correctly. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing is you got to get the crash report. Now in DOT recordable accidents, they're more severe. It's not it's not a fender bender at the red light where your truck rolls into another truck necessarily. And getting crash reports take time. If it's a fatality accident, it could be 6 months to 12 months before you get that report. If it is a not so major incident, it could be 30 to 90 days before that report is available. You can't do anything in this until you get that report. You got to see what the officer wrote up. You got to see what you're trying to dispute on that. Then you've got your driver's statement. Then you've got your weather conditions that you're getting. You've got the latitude and longitude from the Vetter video. You got the speed. You've got photos that were taken after the accident, probably. You've got all of this data. If all of that data is in your favor, then you need to consider to do this because there are certain classifications that are fairly automatic. And the good thing about the crash preventability program is it tells you right here what is allowed. So if you get rear-ended, and I'll give you an example. I was handling a DOT operation a few years ago where the driver was stopped at a red light. He got rear-ended by a drunk driver. The driver perished in that accident. And we lost that because the safety director for that company did not send the driver for a post-accident drug and alcohol test. That was the whole thing. Driver wasn't at fault. He was stopped at a red light. Everything was fine. And we lost it because we didn't have the drug and alcohol test. But it's telling you right here exactly what's going on that is a classification on this. Struck by an animal is in there. This one right here, unfortunately, I've handled several of those in the network, and that one we'll get it there. So this guide here, this is your thing. Again, you can download it, you can go into it, and the nice thing about this guide, it's giving you pictures. Eligible, not eligible, not eligible, eligible, not eligible. So like a car changing lanes and hitting the back area of the trailer, that's eligible. Hitting the front part of the trailer, not eligible. So it's showing you pictures exactly of what they will accept. Now, here's the key to that. You've got a guide here that's saying what's eligible and not eligible. The evidence that you are submitting to go to non-preventable has to match the eligible requirement. That's the secret is, if it's this one right here, I'm not even going to waste my time on this. But if you look at the criteria here, it's going to tell you what is eligible and all that. And keeping this handy will let you know, okay, we had an accident. I think it is a non-preventable incident, and I want to do this process. It's also a handy guide, hint, hint, when you're dealing with Linehaul and they're saying it's a preventable accident. Here is a United States government document with pictures that you can send in on saying, listen, I can get this one with the FMCSA because they say that this is a non-preventable accident. Another little tip for you there. But anyway, get that guide and then get this guide right here. This is the submitter guide. And then this is showing you exactly how to log in and do all this stuff. Crash inspection, investigation, or audit. You're going through here. Again, they're looking for the report. Here it is. There's the report date. Here's the report number. Here's the vehicle plate. It's got to have those criteria inside of this portal for you to be able to pull it over here. And then you just walk through it and all this. Again, what I said about doing the DataQ process, have all your ducks in a row with all your evidence on putting all of this together. It's a lot. I'm going to be honest with you. There is not a large percentage for winning these things. If I was to guess, it's somewhere between 10 to 15% on the DataQ process of violations and 10% to 20% or 15% for changing it to a non-preventable accident. It's a very low percentage. Okay, then you're going, well, why the heck do I need to do this? If you do win it, then you're getting it off your SRS report. it's good to know on this. If you think about what the DataQ process is doing and what it wants accurate data. So if the officer's wrong and you're providing accurate data and it updates the system, it makes the data stronger for everybody that's on our roads and all that. I just don't want you to be disillusioned and go, okay, I attended John's webinar and I'm going to data queue everything and I'm going to win everything. It's not going to be. Um, we have a DOT officer on staff with 35 years of experience that he has the same results and he has the actual criteria from the DOT officers. He gets to see, how the officer wrote the inspection, who wrote it, why they wrote it, what they were looking at on this stuff. He has to, go through this process. Okay, I still disagree with it. I need to get to the officer supervisor, have a discussion with the supervisor. He's written letters to the governor of a state because the procedure for that is completely wrong. And it's just, it doesn't work on that. So I just want you to know that it's something I think you should try to do, or at least contact us and let us do it because, again, I've got a DOT officer and myself with over 35 years of experience to do these things, and it's getting it done and getting the information and getting this off your SRS report. So I I know that was a lot, and it's a very complex system, but if you'll get the video link of this, watch it a couple of times and follow it, make sure your drivers understand. It all starts there with this. If your driver has a poor attitude or they don't tell you about an inspection and all that, you're already behind the eight ball. Then understanding this process and going through it step by step will get you some success. And overall on the network, part of the problem we have is we're operating under someone else's DOT number. And therefore, all of the TSPs are suffering from the group as a whole. So if we did a process where we data queued every single roadside violation and the CSA scores started going down, then we would have a better relationship with Linehaul on how we're doing this. So that's part of it. From Linehaul, they don't want you to get the violation in the first place. Okay. All right. Here's our training. Here's our procedures. Here's what we're doing to do that. But there's going to be times where your driver does everything right and the violation gets written by the officer, and then there's the DataQ process to get it removed. So it's those two things that are weighing down on us as a group as a whole that is causing the problem. Is there's just not a whole lot of data queues being done. So that was a lot. Let me go into the questions here. Okay. I don't see any questions. If you have one, put it into the question real quick. Okay. I really appreciate you attending today. I know that was a lot of information. Get with your drivers, talk to them, get your procedures in place, get your training in place. Um, if you're one of our customers, we're doing the data queues for you on your behalf. If you don't use us, then make sure that you reach out and contact us. I appreciate every one of you. If you have questions afterwards, get in contact with us and we're here to help. Thank y'all.